Okay, there we go. よろしくお願いします. Trying to do fancy things with the computer. It's not working out. Hi. Well, welcome to the live stream from Daishu-in West. I'm Koju. Well, let's see. It's actually a rainy day at the temple today. It's very nice. Looks like we have a few days of light rain. Seems like it's about time. We haven't had hardly any so far this year, so very happy about that. Slightly overexposed. Oh, there we go. That's better. Yeah, just had to do that. はい。Here at the temple, every morning we start with sutras, of course. Morning sutras. Well, technically we do yoga first, but the first item of the temple schedule is joka. And that's pretty much universal any place I've been. You start off with joka. And we read the sutras, we read, essentially what we do at Daitokuji Monastery. Same thing here. The dedications, of course, are a little bit different. And then we always end with Shigusei Gamon, the four great vows. And probably most anybody who's gone to a Zen temple knows, has read those. One of them, one of the four great vows, the third in the series, is, the Dharma gates are innumerable. I vow to study them all. Big deal. And it doesn't take very much looking once we start really looking into it to see that all Dharma gates are in fact connected. Any single Dharma, and I just mean thing that occurs, thing that arises. Any Dharma, any existent thing is itself, connected to all things. It doesn't have a separate reality without the rest of Dharma. So in that way, it's said to be non-existent, but it can also be said that it is everything else. That it is not a separate thing of itself. It is, in fact, as it is, inherently all things. And so that's that's a big statement. This is engi, codependent arising. All manifestation, apparent manifestation arises together with everything else. It all arises together. There isn't any sort of separate thing, that is special and kept apart. That is not a part of Indra's net or a part of Dharma. That is not a Dharma gate. The fact that it is all arising together means that all things are empty, and means that all things depend on every other thing. And that's really just two ways of coming at, stating the same thing. So then from the point of view of Dharma gates, what does it mean then to study the Dharma gates? If they're inherently empty, and we can say that studying the Dharma gates is in fact seeing into their inherent emptiness. moment by moment. Um, and perhaps failing to see that inherent emptiness is just being an ordinary person thrown about by causes and conditions and subject to karma, because we're not actually seeing. We get caught up in the surface matters, like not seeing the emptiness of a manifest dharma. Is just seeing it as a surface thing and pretending that it is something self-existent and not codependent with everything else that arises. I don't know why my connection is so bad this morning. Maybe it has to do with the rain, but I apologize if I'm cutting out. So, yeah, I don't know what to do here. So maintaining that awareness, moment to moment of the emptiness, of the appearance of things, of the reality of things, not getting caught up in the appearance of things, but seeing into the reality of the emptiness of dharmas is what we call studying the Dharma gates, and that's a tall order. That's a tall order, and it takes determination. Like serious, bone-breaking determination. It can't just, it's not going to be, we're not going to see that. We're not going to practice in that way of step by step, breath by breath, seeing into the inherent empty nature of what arises, if we're just lukewarm about it. This is where Master Hakuin talks about great determination. And this determination comes from suffering. It has to. Because not seeing things in that way and being caught up in the surface matters is inherently a mistaken viewpoint that directly leads to suffering. We get caught up in the apparent reality of things and never works out quite the way we think, and we suffer. And so that suffering is in fact a great gift. We try to inevitably, well, as usual, I should speak for myself. If you're like me, the tendency, the desire is to get away from that suffering, to somehow bow out. And disconnect, shall we say, rather than moment by moment, touching that, being intimate with what is manifesting. Instead, we'll practice some kind of, disconnecting, whether it's just disconnecting into fantasy, I want things to be a particular way, I would really prefer this, and want to avoid that. I mean, that's a kind of fantasy. That's a way of disconnecting from what's actually happening. Or, when people have extravagant, complicated ways of avoiding reality. We don't need to go into it here. But as people, like, we're really pretty skillful at ways of avoiding what's actually going on to our detriment, because it does actually cause us suffering. So that determination, if we recognize that suffering, then it gives rise to determination to instead check back in, to touch moment by moment what's happening, what's going on, to cultivate that intimacy with quote unquote reality, with what is, and not just kind of fade out or escape into fantasy. And that deliberate touching, moment by moment, or the resolution, to cultivate that touching moment by moment, is a mark of maturity, I'd say. People who are newer to the practice, they want to work really, really hard and have a peak experience, and then all things are going to be fixed, right? It's going to be whatever the problem is, or the alleged problem is, it will be solved by some experience, and then the person, won't have to deal with that anymore, and I won't suffer again. It's not a very mature view, frankly. Maybe that happens for some people. I don't know. It seems kind of unlikely to me, but the world is big and complicated, and maybe that happens somewhere. But it seems unlikely. My experience, and I think this sort of bears out. I've seen other people talk to this, is that we stop actually looking at any sort of result, any sort of end game. We're not practicing so that I can get somewhere. All we're practicing for is that moment by moment touching reality. And we inevitably go off somewhere and get caught up in ideas, fantasy, and then we remember ourselves and we come back to what is. That always is. And we might as well call that myself. Not my little self, not the thing, although that's not separate from it either. But we don't put that front and center and say everything revolves around this little self. Instead, the self is arising concurrently with all things as part and parcel of everything. So it has no special designation, it has no special little circle. It's just another phenomena that depends on everything else for all time, extending in all directions equally everywhere. And so when it asserts itself and, makes itself known, then it's just oh, there's that thing again yapping away like it always does. It has no special reality. And so it doesn't interfere with our clear perception and responding, participating, shall we say, in the wonderfulness of what is. It is participating along with us, along with everything. Right. Well, that's good enough. So I'm back on the schedule now. I wasn't here last week because we had a kind of a strange sesshin schedule. And we just ended sesshin on this last Tuesday instead of, we usually end on our Sunday afternoon zazenkai. So if we have a sesshin, usually I've just finished before I give this talk. But this time we did it differently. So we were doing sesshin during last Sunday, so I didn't jump online. But now we're on the regular schedule, and next Sunday I will be back at 1:30 as usual. So please, if you want to get in contact with the temple, you can write to contact@daishu-in-west.org, or call, or get online and give us a shout.